When the Soviet Union officially dissolved in 1991, it was a landmark event in world history. The United States emerged from World War II and the Cold War as the world's lone superpower. Hegemony is defined as the position of being the strongest and most powerful, and therefore able to control others. That is precisely what the US experienced in the 1990s. In the wake of the Soviet collapse, some Western commentators gleefully proclaimed that the end of history had occurred. They declared that the American system would dominate the world forevermore. However, fast forward 30 years to today, and things are looking very different from those predictions. In the 2020s, countries like China and Russia have re-emerged as powerful forces who act against Washington. Many countries no longer see America as a good or rational actor on the world stage. This viewpoint is increasingly shared even by countries considered democratic, like India and Brazil. Not only is America losing influence abroad, quality of life in America is objectively getting worse. To name just some metrics over the last decade, America is the only developed country where life expectancy is dropping. The birth rate is the lowest in history, while drug deaths and suicide, known as deaths of despair, are the highest in history. These realities are reflected in polls of how Americans see the state of the country. 2/3 say the country is getting worse every year. As of 2023, only 11% rate American morality as good or better, while over 50% rate it as poor. This means that roughly half of Americans think the country is morally bankrupt. In this video, I'll examine why the age of American world hegemony is ending, how other countries are reacting, and why these changes mark a new era of world history. We live in a time where so many people have fallen out of touch with their heritage. That's why I've partnered with this video sponsor, myheritage.com. MyHeritage is the leading global service for family history research. It gives you a fun and easy way to build your family tree and discover your family's origins. MyHeritage finds family members and records of your ancestors for you, even if you don't know much about your family's history. It pulls information from over 19 billion historical records, including photos and newspaper articles. MyHeritage also provides tools that let you colorize and animate old family photos. When I used the website, I was amazed at how much information it gave me automatically. I knew my grandfather fought in the US military in the Pacific Theater of World War II, but MyHeritage showed me that he actually achieved the rank of Major. I never knew that before. I also found my grandmother graduated with a bachelor's degree in education and worked as a teacher. Once I linked my grandparents, I found my great-grandparents, their siblings, and even the day they got married. So today, I have better knowledge of my family history than ever before. Sign up using my link for MyHeritage and you'll get a 14-day free trial to try all of the features they have to offer. That's my link to get a 14-day free trial for myheritage.com today. Special thanks again to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. As I said in the intro of the video, America has suffered catastrophic backslides on key areas that show the health of society. In foreign affairs, the world is also becoming more independent of American influence. There are many multifaceted reasons for this. The biggest major factor is internal. An ever-increasing number of Americans simply no longer support American power abroad. Many are even checking out of the idea of America itself. A big cause of this is that American institutions simply do not act in the interests of the majority population. While the American GDP continues to rise, this increase is mostly concentrated under multinational corporations and billionaires. In recent decades, the American economy has become extremely centralized under just a few monopolistic and duopolistic companies who own just about everything. Despite this supposed economic growth, the average American citizen has not seen their standard of living rise. This is reflected in polls that show how most citizens believe the economy is getting worse. It is, for them. One group is especially dissatisfied with the state of modern America: white Americans, the majority population, and they have ample reason to be angry. White Americans are discriminated against in employment and the university system, disempowering them from society. This is very consequential because universities are where a society's future elites are trained. This discrimination is so bad that in 2023, the Supreme Court ruled that universities had to end affirmative action policies that were discriminating against whites and Asians. Despite this ruling, top universities immediately announced that they would find ways to get around the decision. On the demographic level, white Americans are about to dip below 60% of the country's population for the first time in history. When told that more white Americans are dying than being born, many in America cheer.
Here's the results of the 2020 census just came out, and for the first time in American history, the number of white people went down.
It's become common knowledge that hate crime laws are rarely enforced when a victim is white, even when anti-white racial hate is obvious. White Americans have responded to all of these things with what can only be described as disaffection, and this has real consequences. The US Army can no longer reach its recruiting goals, and this is largely due to whites no longer signing up. To give some numbers, 44,000 white recruits joined the Army in 2018. But this number cratered to just 25,000 in 2023. In the same time period, whites went from 56% of new recruits to only 44%. Even military leaders attribute this to a drop in rural white recruitment. One Army official told Military.com, "There's a level of prestige in parts of conservative America with service that has degraded." But it's not just the military. The journalist Jeremy Carl wrote, "White college enrollment for 18 to 24-year-olds has dropped from 43% in 2010 to 38% in 2021, the sharpest drop for any major ethnic group. Enrollment is down sharply among white men, the group that has historically led America's institutions. Whites, as a percentage of medical students, are also well below their population numbers. Both Democrats and Republicans have done nothing to address these problems. Many white Americans are simply asking themselves, why should I care about a country that doesn't care about me? The answer, for an ever-increasing number, is that they owe America nothing. This is connected to another problem in America. The American system no longer produces strong families and communities at a level to sustain itself. Strong families produce citizens with good values and instincts who propel society forward. For a society to even reproduce itself, each family must have at least 2 children. But in America, this number fell from over 3 children per family in the 1960s to 1.7 today. To keep the population growing, the government has allowed in tens of millions of immigrants. But this mass immigration has its own negative consequences. Research like Robert Putnam's book, Bowling Alone, details how mass immigration reduces social trust and community participation. People like being able to trust that their neighbors are similar to them and share their values and history. That quality seems to have been lost in modern America.
Our research shows that the more diverse a community, the lower the level of social trust in that community. Volunteerism and philanthropy and civic engagement, involvement in the community, all of that tends to decline.
On top of this, mass immigration hurts the labor force and housing markets. Multinational corporations love it, since it lets them pay their employees far less. These policies continue whether Democrats or Republicans are elected. The only thing that could really change the status quo would be the rise of a third party, but this has proven extremely difficult. Third parties in America struggle to even get on the ballot or into debates, let alone achieve a majority vote. This is all made worse by the fact that in over 95% of American elections, the candidate with more money wins. Americans see this, and as a result, most hate Congress and believe the government doesn't represent them. According to one recent poll, a majority of Americans now believe the US government is a declining empire led by corrupt politicians. Now let's talk in terms of foreign policy. Despite the decline at home, the American establishment continues to support a form of American globalism, a system where America dominates the world and rewrites international law to its own benefit. But decades of American decline and disaffection has made this much more difficult. Even at the height of its power, the American government engaged in debacles like the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, where trillions were spent for little gain. In Afghanistan, the country had to be abandoned after 20 years because the American system failed to establish democracy there. Indeed, the democratic government they established was more useless than anyone could have imagined. Once American troops withdrew, it collapsed to the Taliban in just a month. For comparison, when America withdrew from Vietnam, South Vietnam held out for 2 years. Despite trillions upon trillions of dollars being spent on failures, the American government continues to spend more money on its military than the next 9 countries in the world combined. Meanwhile, the NATO alliance, while getting bigger with new members, does have growing cracks. America's surveillance state has acted indiscriminately to spy on both rivals and allies. Among America's friends, French and German leaders are the most commonly targeted with espionage. This begs the question of why this strong alliance relies on spying on its own members. Scandals like this have greatly damaged America's reputation, as it claims to be a champion of freedom. Instead, it's now become a popular saying, "It may be dangerous to be America's enemy, but to be America's friend is fatal." American leadership has further torched its international moral authority by offering endless support to Israel in its war on Gaza. American money and weapons continue to flow even as the Israelis commit some of the worst war crimes against civilians of the 21st century. Since 2023, America has given billions in aid to Israel, including over 15,000 bombs. These bombs were promptly dropped on Palestinian civilians. Despite the massive bipartisan backlash to these policies, US leadership has continued on and vetoed 3 UN ceasefire proposals. But even with full American backing, the combination of Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, and the Houthis are putting the continuation of Israel's existence into question. China, Russia, and many others have all endorsed a Palestinian state to the outrage of Washington. And Russia and China are going beyond just words. In 2024, they took measures to reconcile Hamas and the Palestinian Authority in order to move forward with the creation of a Palestinian state. America, seen as a bad faith actor completely in bed with Israel, was ignored. It was once believed that Israel could stand on its own without America, but today it's obvious that the American system is propping Israel up despite the severe damage this causes to American interests and credibility. The international scholar John Mearsheimer tributes this to the power of the Israeli lobby over American politics.
Realist logic says that the United States should act in its own strategic interest, and it should pursue policies that make good sense for fostering the security of the United States. And because of the power of the lobby and the ability, therefore, of Israel to get its way in terms of shaping American policy in the Middle East, we end up doing things that are not in our national interest.
This only adds to the view of many that the rules-based international order just means rules for everyone except the US and Israel. It's not just American rivals who are on the move. The rest of the world has noticed America's decline and is responding accordingly. Even some countries that are American allies on paper are starting to change their standing. The nation of Hungary is a prime example. For over a decade, the Western establishment pressured Viktor Orban to accept mass immigration and transform Hungary into a multiracial state. Simultaneously, they attacked the country for its traditional family values and anti-LGBT policies. However, Viktor Orban refused to budge and suffered massive penalties for his principled stance. Today, Hungary is able to align itself with China and Russia to avoid such bullying. Unlike the EU, they aren't asking Hungary to become an immigrant or LGBT-friendly nation. They simply want cooperation. As a result, in 2024, China and Hungary signed a cooperation agreement. This came despite anger and threats from the US diplomat to Hungary, who threatened America would try to overthrow the Hungarian government for its actions. Behind closed doors, Hungary now considers the US an enemy due to its hostility to their values. Viktor Orban and Hungary have set the standard for how small nations can protect their sovereignty in the new multipolar world. When one power is trying to bully you, simply start working with others. The case of Hungary is a reminder that there are still many in the Western world who actually want to conserve their nations and not just sell them out. Other groups doing this include El Salvador under Nayib Bukele and Alternative for Deutschland in Germany. Bukele has thrown out American human rights considerations when dealing with El Salvador's drug cartels. Despite cries from American NGOs demanding that drug dealers be set free, Bukele's policies dropped El Salvador's crime rate by over half. This drove his approval rating to over 90%. It turns out, actually locking up criminal gangs instead of letting them terrorize society is a good idea. Meanwhile, AfD's platform in Germany speaks volumes. Their policies include making Germany a homeland for Germans and stopping mass immigration, protecting Germany's Christian culture, and depending less on America and becoming friendlier to Russia and China. Under this platform, they're now one of the most popular parties in Germany despite major suppression from the state. Among German youth, they are the most popular party. The German economy has greatly suffered from sanctioning Russia, who provided massive raw materials for their industries. Many Germans today are wondering exactly why they should consider Russia an enemy. After all, part of why the NATO alliance was created, in the words of its first Secretary General Lord Ismay, is to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. I wonder why Germans might have a problem with that. The 2022 sabotage of the Nord Stream pipeline has only escalated this discontent. It's deeply ironic that America today uses its global power to push for feminism, LGBT, and mass immigration. During the Cold War, the US positioned itself as the champion of Christianity and family values against Soviet atheism. But today, it's China and Russia who say they stand for family values and heteronormativity. Both countries back this up by banning LGBT propaganda. Russia added the LGBT movement to its list of extremist organizations, and China has gone as far as banning depictions of feminine men in media. This presents a diplomatic problem for America since heterosexual values are the values of the vast majority of humanity. American leadership has responded to all of these problems with economic sanctions, a powerful weapon in their arsenal. According to the Washington Post, the US is currently sanctioning 1/3 of the states in the entire world. This is 3 times as many sanctions as applied by any other government or organization. In the 1990s, Iraq was starved into submission by American sanctions, but countries are learning more every year in how to dodge this problem. Mainstream outlets acknowledge that Russia's economy has resiliently weathered sanctions. Its oil exports have found new markets, and its gross domestic product is projected to grow a healthy 2.6% this year. Iran and China have also found ways to grow stronger despite sanctions. All 3 nations have replaced their dependence on embargoed markets with new markets in Latin America, Asia, and India. When measured by Purchasing Power Index, China's economy is now larger than America's. It's become clear that the American government's control over the global economy is not what it used to be. If you watched my video on the French Revolution, you know that when state debt reaches a point of no return, it usually spells doom for an empire. Starting this year, the US now spends more on debt service than defense, something that also came during the decline of the British Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the French monarchy, and more. Perhaps this metric is the most revealing about the fate of the American empire. So, to recap, America is in decline because it betrayed the very things that made it strong: white people and family values. While it presented itself as a champion of Christianity in the Cold War, it now spreads the opposite of Christian values globally. In the 2020s, not only has America lost its position as the world's sole superpower, the decline of quality of life within America is sending it into second world status. There's no doubt that America still remains a powerful force in the world, but the days of the unipolar moment are over. More sovereign states will now act in their own best interests rather than give blind deference to Washington. Instead of fighting this, America should work on fixing its own internal problems. Unfortunately, the Western establishment probably won't do this. They'll double down and call for more wars, more interventions, and demonize foreign powers instead of cleaning up their own mess. This may lead to war in the very near future. I want to make absolutely clear I stand 100% against any new US war abroad, regardless of the justification or excuse used. History is back in motion and the world is rapidly changing. Fortunately, this will present many opportunities for positive change in the future. Let's make sure we take advantage of those opportunities. This has been Pax, and thank you so much for watching. Please leave a comment letting me know your thoughts on all this. If you'd like to see more videos, please consider supporting the channel. Also, make sure to check out my heritage with the links provided below. As always, I will see you in the next video.